The lunch rush had ended 20 minutes ago, but Minsio's hands still smelled like fryer oil and her lower back throbbed with the familiar ache of a double shift. She wiped down the last booth in the corner, the one beneath the flickering fluorescent that maintenance kept promising to fix. The diner was empty except for her manager counting register receipts in the back and one customer she hadn't noticed come in. He sat in the booth she'd just cleaned, watching rain crawl down the window. She approached with the kind of autopilot smile that came after 6 years of carrying plates to people who rarely looked up. "Can I get you?" The words died. He turned to face her, and something in his expression made her forget the script. Not hostile, not warm either, just present in a way that took up more space than his lean frame should have occupied. "Coffee," he said, "whatever food you have left." His voice was quiet. She'd served men who talked loud to prove something, men who whispered to seem dangerous. He did neither. Korean accent, but his English was clean, deliberate. He wore a black coat despite the summer heat outside, and his hands rested flat on the table, perfectly still. "Kitchen's technically closed, but I can make you a sandwich." Minseo pulled out her order pad even though she didn't need it. Something about him made her want to look busy. "Turkey or ham?" "Anything." He glanced at the rain again, then back at her. "I can pay tomorrow." Her pen stopped moving. The diner had a strict policy. Her manager had fired someone last month for giving away day-old donuts. But the man wasn't asking like he expected charity. He said it the way someone states a fact, like the money was already his, just not physically present yet. Minseo looked toward the kitchen. Her manager had moved to his office. She could hear him on the phone, his voice muffled through the wall. "I'll cover it," she heard herself say. "My meal allowance." She waited for gratitude, or at least acknowledgement. He studied her instead, his gaze moving across her face like he was reading something written there. Then he nodded once. Not thank you, just acceptance of the transaction. Minseo made the sandwich exactly how she'd make her own. Good bread from the batch they saved for morning toast, extra turkey, the pepper jack her manager didn't know she preferred. She poured coffee from the fresh pot instead of the one they usually served late-day stragglers. When she set the plate down, he looked at it for a long moment before picking up the sandwich. He ate the way he spoke, precisely, without wasted motion. Minseo refilled his coffee twice, hovering near the drink station longer than necessary. Other customers she would have left alone. This one felt like he might disappear if she turned her back too long. "You work every day?" he asked when she came by the third time. 6 days a week, Sunday off. Same shift. Something in the question landed differently than small talk. Minseo glanced at the window. The rain had gotten heavier, turning the street outside into a blur of neon and headlights. "Morning to close, usually. Why?" "Curiosity." He finished his coffee. When he stood, she realized he was taller than she'd thought, and he moved like someone who'd learned to take up exactly as much space as needed and no more. "I'll remember the sandwich." He was gone before she could respond, the door chime ringing once as he stepped into the rain without hurrying. Minseo cleared his table. He'd left the plate empty except for crumbs, the napkin folded beside it. No tip, but she hadn't expected one from someone who couldn't pay for lunch. She pocketed the $5 from her own wallet to square it with the register, then went back to wiping tables that were already clean. Her manager emerged from his office 10 minutes later, keys jingling. "Lock up after you finish." "Someone came in after close," Minseo said. "I used my meal comp." He waved dismissively, already halfway out the door. "Just don't make it a habit." She locked the door at 9:40, then walked the 6 blocks to her apartment through streets that never felt entirely safe after dark. The rain had stopped, leaving everything slick and reflecting streetlights in fractured patterns. She passed the convenience store where the owner sat behind bulletproof glass, the laundromat that doubled as a front for something no one discussed, the massage parlor with blacked-out windows. This neighborhood existed in the space between districts, claimed by no one officially, but touched by everyone's reach. Minseo had learned to navigate it the way she'd learned to smile at customers, automatically, with just enough awareness to avoid the wrong kind of attention. She was 3 blocks from home when she noticed the footsteps behind her. 2 sets, heavy, matching her pace. Minsio's keys were already in her hand, the apartment key threaded between her knuckles the way her mother had taught her before she died. She didn't run. Running invited chase. She turned left at the next corner, toward the better-lit avenue where late-night restaurants still had customers. The footsteps turned with her. "Hey," one of them called. "Wait up." She walked faster. Her apartment building was 2 blocks ahead, but the entrance was around back, down an alley that suddenly seemed impossibly dark. The avenue stretched before her, emptier than it should have been for 9:50 on a Friday. I said wait, closer now. Minsio's heart kicked against her ribs. She could see her building, could see the light above her 4th-floor window where she'd left the lamp on like always. So close. She started to run. A hand caught her shoulder. She spun, key raised, ready to aim for eyes or throat like the self-defense video she'd watched 3 years ago and never thought she'd need. But before she could strike, the hand released her. Both men stepped back, and the one who'd grabbed her was looking past her, his expression shifting into something Minsio had only seen once before, when she was 12 and watched a boy confront her mother's boyfriend, right before that boyfriend packed his things and left forever without a word. Fear. "Wrong person," the second man said quickly. "Mistake." They backed away, then turned and walked in the opposite direction at a pace that wasn't quite running, but suggested they wanted to. Minsio stood frozen, key still raised, trying to understand what had just happened. She looked behind her, expecting what? Someone. But the street was empty except for a black car idling at the corner, windows tinted too dark to see through. As she watched, it pulled away slowly, deliberate as a predator deciding you weren't worth the effort. She made it to her apartment, locked both deadbolts, and sat on the edge of her bed, still wearing her coat until her hands stopped shaking. The next morning, her manager was already in his office when Minsio arrived at 6:30 for opening prep. She tied her apron, started coffee, arranged the pastries the delivery guy had dropped off 20 minutes earlier. Saturday mornings were always busy. Construction workers needing breakfast before their shifts, families heading to errands, regulars who came for the weekend newspaper and bottomless refills. The day unfolded in its usual rhythm. She took orders, carried plates, smiled at complaints about toast being too dark or eggs too runny. She was clearing table 7 when the door chime rang, and she glanced up out of habit. The man from yesterday walked in. He wore different clothes, dark jeans, a fitted black shirt, but the same stillness surrounded him like weather. He chose a booth near the window, the same position as before, watching. Minsio approached with coffee already in hand. "You came back." "I remember debts." He slid an envelope across the table. "For yesterday." She opened it without thinking, then went very still. The envelope held $500 in clean bills. "The sandwich was $8.50, Minsio said carefully. "With tax. The rest is interest." He said it like this was normal, like casual overpayment was standard practice. "And tip." "I can't accept this." "You already did." His eyes met hers, darker than they'd seemed in yesterday's dim light. "Breakfast menu." Minsio's hands felt strange holding this much cash, like the bills might dissolve or transform into something else. She tucked the envelope into her apron pocket, knowing she'd return it somehow later, once she figured out the right way to refuse. "Same as always. What do you want?" "Recommend something." She'd had customers ask that before, usually the ones too lazy to read the menu. This felt different. Like a test, but she didn't know what the right answer might be. "The breakfast special. Eggs however you want them, bacon, toast, hash browns. It's not fancy, but it's good." "That, eggs over easy." She wrote it down, grateful for something to do with her hands. When she brought the food, he ate the same way as before, precise, focused. She refilled his coffee twice and didn't hover. The morning rush swallowed her attention, a toddler spilling juice, a regular complaining about the temperature, a new higher burning toast and setting off the smoke alarm. When she looked back at the window booth, he was gone. Cash on the table, exact amount for the meal plus 20%. The envelope was still in her apron. Min-si worked the rest of her shift, carrying its weight against her hip, $500 that felt heavier than it should. Her manager called her into his office during the 2 o'clock lull. She expected scheduling questions or another reminder about food costs. Instead, he looked at her with an expression she'd never seen on his face before, something between concern and warning. "That customer this morning," he said, "the one at the window booth." He paid. Minsio's hand went to her apron instinctively, plus tip. "I know who he is." The way he said it made her stomach drop. Not casual recognition, not celebrity or local business owner, something else. "You need to be careful," her manager continued. "Very careful. Don't engage more than necessary. Take his money, bring his food, keep your head down." "I don't understand." He looked at her like he was deciding something, then seemed to reach a conclusion. "This district, all 6 blocks of it, every business, every building, belongs to certain people. People who don't advertise but who make sure everything runs smooth. You understand what I'm saying?" Minseo understood. Everyone who lived here understood, even if no one said it directly. The neighborhood existed under management, unofficial but absolute. The kind where police rarely responded quickly and problems got solved through different channels. "He's one of them," she asked quietly. "He is them, all of them." Her manager leaned back in his chair, suddenly looking tired. "His name is Kang Jae-hoon. He's been running this district for 3 years. Before that, he was in Seoul doing things I don't want to know about. When he showed up here, 5 different crews tried to push him out. None of them are around anymore." The breakfast special, the calm way he moved, the car that had idled at the corner last night while 2 men walked away from her like she'd suddenly become radioactive. "Why is he here?" Minseo heard herself ask. "In the diner, I mean, people like that don't." "I don't know, but whatever the reason, you don't want to be part of it." He met her eyes. "Take his money, do your job, forget his face the second he walks out that door. Understand?" She nodded, but her hand stayed pressed against the envelope in her apron pocket. That evening, Minseo walked home with her keys ready and her phone in her other hand. The emergency call screen pulled up, but not dialed. The streets felt different now that she understood whose streets they were. Every storefront she'd passed 1,000 times before suddenly seemed connected to invisible threads, all leading back to one quiet man who ate breakfast at window booths and overpaid for sandwiches. She made it home without incident, locked her doors, sat on her bed and counted the money again, hoping she'd somehow miscounted earlier. $500, enough to cover the rent payment she'd been $30 short on, enough to fix the grinding noise her car had started making, enough to stop eating ramen 3 nights a week. She put it in an envelope, wrote "Return to Customer," KJH on the front, and tucked it into her purse. Tomorrow, she'd give it back, politely, professionally, because getting tangled with people who ran entire districts was exactly the kind of complication her life didn't need. But when Sunday came, her day off, Minseo found herself thinking about the way he'd looked at the sandwich she'd made. Not grateful, not pitying, just seen, like her small kindness had registered as something worth remembering. No one remembered waitresses. Monday morning, she arrived at the diner with the envelope still in her purse. She'd rehearsed what to say. "Thank you, but this is too much. I can't accept it." Simple, direct, professional. Kang Jae-hoon walked in at 7:15. He sat at the same booth. She approached with coffee and the envelope, her speech ready. But when she opened her mouth, different words came out. "Why did you come back?" He looked at her, and for the first time she saw something other than stillness in his expression. Not quite a smile, something quieter. The sandwich was good. It was turkey and cheese. It was made like it mattered. He gestured to the seat across from him. "Sit." "I'm working." "Your manager won't mind." He was right, and they both knew it. Minseo slid into the booth, the envelope between them on the table. "I can't keep this money." "Why?" "Because a sandwich costs $8.50, and you gave me $500. I gave you what the gesture was worth." Kang Jae-hoon picked up his coffee, casual as breathing. You used your meal allowance. That means you ate less that day. You gave something that cost you, not me. That's different than charity. It was just lunch. No, he set the cup down precisely in its center ring stain. It was a choice. You saw someone you thought couldn't pay, and you decided that was a problem you'd solve. Most people wouldn't. Min Seo wanted to argue, but something in his tone told her he'd made up his mind in ways that had nothing to do with logic. She pushed the envelope toward him anyway. I still can't take it. He didn't touch it. Then use it however you want. Donate it, burn it, pay your rent, but it's yours now. Why? Because debts matter. He said it simply, like this was obvious. Someone does something for you, you remember. You return it when you can. That's how things work. In your world. In every world that matters. The morning rush started building, customers filing in with briefcases and strollers and construction helmets. Min Seo stood, the envelope still on the table between them. What do you want for breakfast? The same as Saturday. You know what I like. She did, and that felt more dangerous than the money. Over the next week, Kang Jae-hoon came to the diner 6 times. Different hours, sometimes breakfast, once for dinner, twice for afternoon coffee. He always chose the window booth, always ordered simply, always left exact payment plus 20%. He didn't try to talk beyond basic order exchanges, didn't linger after finishing his food. But Min Seo felt his presence the way you feel weather changing. Her manager got quieter when he was there. Other customers didn't sit in the booths near him. The busboy cleared his table with hands that trembled slightly. Only Min Seo treated him normally, because she'd met him before knowing his name, and that first impression had lodged itself somewhere beneath the fear everyone else carried. On Thursday, a man came into the diner at 2:30. Min Seo was wiping tables during the afternoon lull, and she noticed him immediately because he looked at the room the way predators looked at enclosed spaces, calculating exits, marking positions, assessing threats. He sat at the counter, ordered coffee, spent 30 minutes making a single cup last while his eyes tracked every person who came through the door. Min Seo refilled it twice, and each time he smiled in a way that made her skin prickle. You work here long? He asked the second time. 6 years. Know all the regulars. Most of them. See anyone new recently? Someone who comes in often, maybe sits at that booth. He nodded toward the window. Min Seo's training kicked in, the same instinct that made her smile through rude customers and laugh off uncomfortable comments. Lots of people sit there. It's got the best light. Korean guy, tall, quiet. Lots of Korean guys come through. She kept her voice light, bored, like this was the least interesting conversation she'd had all day. You want anything else? Pie, we have apple and cherry. He watched her for a long moment, then dropped a 20 on the counter. Just the coffee. She gave him change, and he left it all as tip. The money sat there for an hour after he walked out, and Min Seo couldn't bring herself to touch it. That evening, she locked up at 9:40 like always and started her walk home. The streets were quiet, humid summer air pressing down like a held breath. She was 2 blocks from her apartment when the black car pulled up beside her. The back window lowered. Get in, Kang Jae-hoon's voice, calm as ever. Min Seo stopped walking. The car idled, door already opening. She could keep walking, pretend she hadn't heard. Make it home and lock her doors and hope that whatever this was would resolve itself without her involvement. Instead, she got in. The interior was dark leather and silence. Kang Jae-hoon sat on the far side, giving her space. The driver pulled away from the curb smoothly, heading away from her apartment. Where are we going? Min Seo asked. Somewhere safe. My apartment is safe. Not anymore. He said it without inflection, just fact. A man came to the diner today, asked about me. I didn't tell him anything. I know. That's why you're here instead of somewhere worse. The implications settled over her like cold water. Min Seo looked out the window at streets she didn't recognize, neighborhoods that got nicer the farther they drove from hers. What do you want from me? Nothing. Then why? Because you made me a sandwich. He said it the same way he'd said everything else, like this was logical. Because you used your meal allowance. Because when someone asked about me, you protected information you didn't even know was valuable. That means you're involved whether you want to be or not. Involved in what? Transition. The word hung in the air between them. Min-seo turned to look at him fully for the first time since entering the car. In this light, she could see details she'd missed before, a thin scar along his jaw, another at his temple, the kind that came from things sharper than accidents. Someone wants your territory, she said. Someone thinks they can take it. He looked at her, and his expression carried no anger, no fear, nothing but that same absolute stillness. They're wrong, but the process of proving that involves consequences. Sometimes those consequences spread to people nearby, people who did nothing except exist in the wrong place. People like me. People like you. The car stopped in front of a high-rise Min-seo had passed before, but never imagined entering. Glass and steel, the kind of building where doormen wore suits and apartments cost more per month than she made in a year. I have work tomorrow, she said. Early shift. You'll make it. Kang Jae-hoon opened his door. But tonight you stay somewhere they won't look. She followed him through a lobby that smelled like expensive flowers and up an elevator that moved too smoothly to feel like motion. His apartment was on the 32nd floor, sparsely furnished but immaculate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the district, her district, spread out below like something small enough to hold in your hand. Guest room is there. He pointed down a hallway. Lock if you want, I'll be in the office. How long do I have to stay here? Until the man who asked about me understands why that was a mistake. Min-seo stood in the enormous living room, still holding her purse, still wearing her diner uniform that smelled like fryer oil and coffee. I didn't ask for any of this. I know. For the first time, something like regret touched his voice. But you gave me lunch anyway, and now we're both living with that choice. He disappeared down the hallway, leaving her alone with floor-to-ceiling views of a city that had suddenly become much more complicated than 6 blocks and a double shift. Min-seo didn't sleep. She lay in the guest room, bigger than her entire apartment, and watched headlights move across the ceiling. Somewhere below, in streets she'd walked 1,000 times, pieces were moving in a game she didn't understand, but was apparently playing whether she wanted to or not. At 3 a.m., she got up and found Kang Jae-hoon in his office, sitting behind a desk with papers spread before him. He looked up when she appeared in the doorway but didn't seem surprised. Can't sleep, he asked. Would you? No, he gestured to the chair across from him. Sit if you want. She sat. The office was decorated like the rest of the apartment, minimal, expensive, nothing personal except a single photograph on the desk. A woman and a young girl, both smiling. Min-seo didn't ask. The man from the diner, she said. What will you do to him? Nothing he doesn't expect. Kang Jae-hoon set down the paper he'd been reading. He works for someone who thinks I'm vulnerable because I operate differently than they're used to. Quieter, less visible. They mistake that for weakness. Is it? You tell me. He leaned back, and the motion was relaxed but contained, like violence folded into neat creases. I run 6 blocks, every business, every building, every transaction. No one gets hurt who doesn't ask for it. No civilians caught in problems that aren't theirs. No expansion, no war, no spectacle, just management, protection, order. That's not what I expected. What did you expect? Min-seo thought about it. Something louder. Loud gets people killed, quiet keeps them safe. He paused. Usually. But not always. No, sometimes quiet just means the violence is more precise. She should have been afraid. Every survival instinct she developed over 28 years of existing as a woman in difficult spaces told her to be terrified of this calm man who spoke about violence like weather patterns. But instead, she felt something else. Curiosity, maybe, or the exhausted recognition that she'd already stepped off the edge of whatever safe ground she'd been standing on. The sandwich, Min-seo said. It really was just about the sandwich. Does that surprise you? Yes. Why? Because people like you don't notice people like me. Kang Jae-hoon studied her for a long moment. I notice everything. That's why I'm still alive. And what I noticed was someone who gave me something that cost her, without hesitation, without expectation. That's rare. Rare things matter. So now I'm rare. She didn't bother hiding the bitterness. Lucky me. Now you're remembered, which means you're protected, whether you want to be or not. He stood, and the motion was fluid, controlled. Get some sleep. Tomorrow I'll make sure the message is clear, and then you can go back to your life. What message? That touching you would be the last mistake someone makes. He said it simply, without emphasis, and that made it more frightening than any threat shouted loud. Min Seo went back to the guest room but still didn't sleep. She lay awake until dawn light started bleeding through the curtains, painting the expensive walls gold. At 6 a.m., Kang Jae-hoon knocked softly on her door. I'll drive you to work. She emerged wearing yesterday's clothes, feeling grimy and displaced. The car ride back to the diner was silent, streets slowly filling with early traffic. He pulled up to the service entrance instead of the front. This ends today, he said. But if anyone asks you anything about me or anything else, you say nothing. Not because I'm telling you to, because it's safer. I already know that. Good. He looked at her and something in his expression had shifted, less distant, more present. The money in your apron, you never spent it. It wasn't a question. Min Seo wondered how he knew. I was going to return it. Don't. Use it for whatever makes your life easier. That's what debts look like when they're paid correctly. She got out of the car, then paused with the door half open. Thank you, for last night. She gestured vaguely, encompassing safety and protection and consequences she'd never asked for. For a sandwich, he finished. We're even now. The car pulled away, and Min Seo went inside to start her shift. The day unfolded normally. Breakfast rush, lunch crowd, afternoon lull. Her manager didn't ask where she'd been, and the busboy avoided eye contact. At 2:30, during the quiet hour, a different man came in. Older, wearing an expensive suit that looked out of place among the vinyl booths. He sat at the counter, ordered coffee. When Min Seo brought it, he smiled, but his eyes stayed cold. You're the girl, he said. I'm a waitress. She set the cup down. Anything else? My associate stopped by last week. Asked some questions. Lots of people ask questions. He won't be asking anymore. The man said it casually, like discussing weather. Unfortunate accident. These things happen. Min Seo's hands went very still. She kept her expression neutral, bored, the same face she used for every difficult customer. Cream and sugar are at the station. You don't seem concerned. Should I be? That depends. He lifted the cup, sipped, set it down precisely in its ring stain. My associate asked about someone, a Korean man who comes here often. Before his accident, he reported that you were uncooperative. I don't remember specifics about customers. Too many faces. Of course. He pulled out his wallet, removed a business card, slid it across the counter. But if your memory improves, I pay very well for useful information. Better than turkey sandwiches and 20% tips. Min Seo looked at the card, blank except for a phone number embossed in gold. I'll keep that in mind. You do that. He left a 50 for coffee that cost $2.50. Keep the change. Consider it an advance on future cooperation. He walked out, and Min Seo stood behind the counter with a business card that felt like a live wire in her fingers. She threw it away immediately, buried it in coffee grounds and napkins at the bottom of the trash. Her shift ended at 9. She locked up, checked the street twice before stepping outside, and started walking home with her keys ready and her phone unlocked. 3 blocks from her apartment, the black car appeared again. This time, she got in without being asked. Kang Jae-hoon sat in his usual position, giving her space. He came. You knew he would. I encouraged it. He said it calmly. Sometimes you have to let people make mistakes so they understand consequences. What happens now? Now he decides if pushing further is worth what it'll cost him. The car moved through familiar streets, heading toward the high-rise. You did well, saying nothing, giving nothing. That bought time. Time for what? Resolution. Min Seo watched the city pass outside the window. Your associate, the one who had an accident, is he actually dead? Do you want to know? She thought about it. No. Good instinct. They pulled up to the building. Same arrangement as yesterday. Tomorrow morning this will be finished. You keep saying that. Because it's true. He looked at her, and his expression was the closest to gentle she'd seen. I don't make promises I can't keep. It's inefficient. She followed him upstairs, back to the guest room that felt both safer and more dangerous than her own apartment. This time, exhaustion won, and she slept for 5 hours straight, dreamless and deep. At 4 a.m., she woke to voices in the other room, not arguing, too controlled for that, but weighted with things that mattered. Min Seo stayed in bed, listening to tones rather than words until silence returned. At 5:30, Kang Jae-hoon knocked. It's done. She emerged to find him in the kitchen, making coffee with the same precision he applied to everything else. He poured 2 cups, slid one across the counter to her. What's done? Min Seo asked. The man who came to the diner, his employer, their interest in my territory and their curiosity about you. He drank his coffee black. All resolved. How? Conversations, demonstrations, the kind that make future problems less likely. You're being vague. Intentionally. He set his cup down. The less you know about methods, the safer you stay. But the outcome is simple. No one will bother you again. No more questions, no more cards with phone numbers, no more associates having accidents near your workplace. Min Seo drank her coffee and tried to feel relief. Mostly she felt tired. So I just go back to normal, pretend this didn't happen. If that's what you want. What I want is to understand why you did any of this. Why you didn't just let them ask questions and get their own answers. Why you brought me here, protected me, solved a problem I didn't even know I had until yesterday. Kang Jae-hoon was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried something she hadn't heard before, not emotion exactly, but the edge of it worn smooth. 3 years ago, I came to this district with nothing. No reputation, no connections, no territory, just a plan and the will to execute it. First week, I had no money for food. Spent my resources on information, on positioning, on buying loyalty from people who mattered. Ate once every 2 days. He paused, refilled his cup. There was a restaurant, small place, family-owned. I sat there for 3 hours pretending 1 cup of tea was worth the table. Owner watched me the whole time, knew exactly what I was. When I got up to leave, his daughter stopped me, gave me a container of food. Wouldn't take payment, said her father had taught her that hungry people deserved to eat regardless of what they looked like or why they had no money. Min Seo set her cup down carefully. What happened to them? Nothing, that's the point. His eyes met hers. A week later, I had territory. A month later, I controlled 3 blocks. Within a year, I owned this entire district. And that family's restaurant? Protected. Forever. No one touches them, no one asks them questions, no one involves them in anything they didn't choose. Because the daughter gave me food when she had no reason to accept kindness. So this is the same thing. This is me remembering that debts matter. That kindness from people who have very little is worth more than loyalty from people who have everything to gain. He finished his coffee. You gave me a sandwich. I'm making sure no one ever makes you regret that. That's not balance. A sandwich isn't worth. She gestured vaguely at the apartment, at the night she'd spent in safety, at whatever conversations and demonstrations had happened in the dark. This. Yes, it is, because the sandwich wasn't about the food. It was about the moment you decided I was worth helping even though helping me cost you something. He stood, and the motion was decisive. I'll drive you to work. After that, we're done. You won't see me at the diner anymore, won't be involved in anything related to my work. You go back to your life. I go back to mine. Just like that. Just like that. The ride to the diner was quiet. Dawn light was turning the city gold, morning traffic building toward rush hour. Kang Jae-hoon pulled up to the service entrance again, and Min Seo reached for the door handle, then stopped. "The photograph," she said. "In your office, the woman and the little girl." His hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "My sister and her daughter." "Where are they?" "Seoul, safe." The word carried finality. "Everything I do is about keeping that true." Min Seo nodded, understanding something she couldn't articulate. "The debt," she said. "If it matters so much to you, then it matters both ways. You protected me. That means I owe you now." "You don't." "I do, and when you need it, not if, when. I'll remember the way you remember." She opened the door. "That's how this works, right? Debts and balance and people keeping their word." For the first time, Kang Jae-hoon smiled. Small, brief, but genuine. "That's exactly how it works." "Then we're not done. We're even." She got out, then leaned back in. "And if you want breakfast, the window booth will always have good light." She closed the door and walked into the diner without looking back. The morning shift unfolded normally. Her manager was quiet but less tense, like something that had been pressed tight had finally released. The busboy made eye contact. Customers sat at every booth without checking who else was there first. At 7:15, Kang Jae-hoon walked in. He sat at the window booth, ordered coffee and the breakfast special, eggs over easy. Min Seo brought it without preamble, refilled his coffee twice, and gave him his check with exact change calculated in her head. He left 20%, precisely measured. Neither of them mentioned the last 2 days. Neither of them had to. Over the following weeks, he came to the diner 4 or 5 times a week. Different days, different times, but always the same booth. He read newspapers, made phone calls that were brief and quiet, ate his food without hurry. Sometimes he was alone. Sometimes other men sat across from him, conversations happening in tones too low to overhear, but always ending with handshakes and small nods. Min Seo served him the same as any other customer. No special treatment, no lingering, no acknowledgement of anything beyond waitress and regular patron. Her manager stopped watching nervously. The other servers stopped avoiding his section. But she noticed things. The way people walked differently when they passed the diner and saw him through the window. The way problems in the neighborhood, broken streetlights, aggressive panhandlers, cars with loud exhausts circling blocks, quietly resolved themselves without official intervention. The way her walk home got safer week by week, like an invisible perimeter had formed around the 6 blocks she moved through daily. One Tuesday evening during the dinner shift, a customer got aggressive. Middle-aged man, drunk, objecting loudly to his bill. He grabbed Min Seo's wrist when she tried to step away, fingers tight enough to bruise. "I said the charge is wrong," he slurred. "You trying to steal from me." "Sir, please let go." The man's hand released instantly. Not because he chose to. Because Kang Jae-hoon had appeared beside the table, silent as weather, and said one word. "Out." The drunk man looked up, seemed to process who he was looking at, and went pale. "I didn't mean." "Out." The man left money on the table and walked out quickly, his aggression evaporating into something like terror. The other diners had gone quiet, all of them suddenly very interested in their food. Kang Jae-hoon looked at Min Seo's wrist where red marks were already forming. "You okay?" "I'm fine. I've dealt with worse." "Not anymore." He said it calmly, then returned to his booth and his newspaper like nothing had happened. Min Seo finished her shift with her wrist throbbing and something warm settling in her chest that she refused to name. At closing, she found an envelope under the salt shaker at the window booth. Inside was a business card, his business card, with a phone number written on the back in precise handwriting. Below the number, one sentence, "For when debts need collecting." She tucked it into her apron pocket and locked up. That night, walking home, Min Seo thought about sandwiches and consequences, about kindness that cost you something and protection that appeared without asking. She thought about a man who remembered debts and a photograph of 2 people in Seoul who were safe because someone quiet and dangerous had decided that mattered more than anything else. She thought about the way he'd looked at the food she'd made that first day. Not grateful, not pitying, but seen. Like her small gesture had registered as something worth remembering in a life where most things probably weren't. When she got home, she put the business card in the drawer of her bedside table, beneath old receipts and expired coupons. She didn't think she'd ever use it, but having it there felt like carrying an umbrella on cloudy days, practical just in case. Weeks turned into months. Summer gave way to fall, heat replaced by rain that smelled like concrete and wet leaves. The diner's regulars came and went, their patterns steady as tide. Kang Jae-hoon remained a constant, appearing 4 times a week like clockwork, always at the window booth, always ordering simply. They didn't speak beyond necessary exchanges. He never mentioned the card. She never mentioned the way her neighborhood had become noticeably safer, how problems dissolved before they could escalate, how even the streetlights seemed to stay working longer than they had before. But Min Seo started making his food the way she'd made that first sandwich, with the good ingredients, the extra attention, the small care that most customers never noticed or deserved. And Kang Jae-hoon noticed. She could tell by the way he ate, the way he looked at the plate before picking up his fork, the way he always finished everything completely. Some debts, she was learning, were too complicated to calculate. They existed in gestures and consequences, in protection offered and kindness remembered, in the space between owing and being owed where something else lived. Not quite friendship, not exactly trust, but solid enough to build on. On a Wednesday in October, Min Seo was wiping tables during the afternoon lull when Kang Jae-hoon walked in 3 hours earlier than usual. His expression was different, not alarmed, but focused in a way that made her immediately alert. He sat at the window booth. She brought coffee without being asked. "There's a problem," he said quietly. "Not with you, but near you." Min Seo set the coffee pot down. "What kind of problem?" "The building where you live. The owner wants to sell. Developer is offering good money, but only if all tenants vacate within 60 days. Your landlord is planning to use creative methods to encourage people to leave." "That's legal. Terrible, but legal." "The methods he's planning aren't." Kang Jae-hoon's eyes met hers. "Cut utilities, fake violations, hired harassment, things that make living there impossible without technically being eviction." "How do you know this?" "Because he asked permission to operate that way in my district. I told him no. He's planning to ignore that." Min Seo sat down across from him, protocol forgotten. "What happens when people ignore you?" "They learn," he said it simply. "But that doesn't solve your housing problem. You'll need a new place anyway once the sale goes through." "I can't afford anything better. I've looked." "I know." He slid a piece of paper across the table, an address written in his precise handwriting. 3 blocks from here, 2-bedroom, reasonable rent, good security. Landlord is cooperative with my recommendations. I can't accept special treatment." "It's not special. It's market rate. I just made sure you heard about it before others." He paused. "The debt, Min Seo. You said when I needed it, you'd remember. I need you to accept this. Because watching people force you out of your home using illegal methods in my district makes me have to respond, and that response causes complications. This is simpler." She looked at the address. 3 blocks, walking distance. Close enough that her routine wouldn't change, far enough that she'd be out of whatever was coming for her current building. "What about the other tenants?" she asked. "Already handled. Everyone in that building will receive similar offers. No one gets harassed, no one gets forced out illegally. Your landlord will find his cooperation more profitable than his original plan." "You're protecting 60 people because of a sandwich." "I'm protecting 60 people because they live in my district and someone tried to violate the rules here." He finished his coffee. "You just happen to be one of them. The fact that I care more about your specific situation is separate." Min Seo took the paper. The address was familiar. She passed that building twice a day. Nice exterior, well-maintained, the kind of place she'd looked at once and dismissed as too expensive. "When can I see it?" "Today, after your shift. Key is with the building manager." He stood, left exact payment for coffee he'd barely touched. The debt, Mincio. This is what it looks like when both sides remember. He walked out, and she sat at the window booth holding an address that felt like a door opening to something she couldn't quite define. That evening, she visited the apartment. 2 bedrooms, updated kitchen, windows that actually sealed properly. The building manager showed her around with the kind of deference people showed Kang Jae-hoon. Polite, but careful, like she was more important than her diner uniform suggested. "Rent is $900 a month," he said. "First month free if you sign before the weekend. Owner's special." Her current place cost $850, not including the utilities that barely worked. "I'll take it." She signed papers, received keys, and walked back to her old apartment feeling like she'd crossed some invisible line she couldn't uncross. Not worse, not better, just different. The move happened over the following week. Kang Jae-hoon didn't offer help, didn't ask about her progress. But on the day she officially moved, she found a gift basket in her new apartment. Expensive coffee, good tea, the kind of practical luxury she'd never buy herself. No card, no note, just presents the way everything else had been. Mincio made coffee in her new kitchen and stood at the window looking out at streets that were hers, but also his, protected but also watched, safe but also complicated. She thought about debts and balance, about kindness and consequences, about a man who remembered gestures and made sure they mattered beyond the moment they happened. Her phone was in her hand before she thought about it. The business card from her bedside drawer memorized, even though she'd only looked at it once. She typed, "Thank you for the coffee." The response came 30 seconds later. "Thank you for the sandwich." Nothing else, nothing needed. Mincio finished her coffee and unpacked boxes in an apartment that felt like hers and his simultaneously, like most things did now. She'd given him lunch because it seemed like the right thing to do. He'd given her safety, housing, and protection because he remembered what it felt like to be hungry and helped. They were even, technically. But standing in her new kitchen, watching evening light paint the walls gold, Mincio suspected they'd never actually be even. Some debts were too complicated for that. They just existed, acknowledged and honored, between people who understood that gestures mattered more than the things they cost. She had his number now. He had her attention. The district around them hummed with invisible management, problems solved before they escalated, order maintained through quiet precision. And twice a week, he still came to the diner, sat at the window booth, and ate food she made with care while rain or sun moved across glass and the city continued existing around them. Safer than it had been, stranger than she'd expected, complicated in ways that felt almost like chosen. Mincy went to work the next morning and poured coffee and carried plates and smiled at customers who didn't know that the ordinary waitress serving their breakfast had accidentally walked into the attention of the district's quietest, most dangerous protector. And when Kang Jae-hoon walked in at 7:15, she brought him coffee and the breakfast special without asking what he wanted. Because some things you learned through repetition, through attention, through the accumulation of small moments that added up to something that looked almost like trust. He nodded once when she set the plate down. She moved on to the next table. Neither of them mentioned new apartments or gift baskets or debts acknowledged through text messages sent in the dark. But his 20% tip was precisely calculated, and her sandwich had been made with the good bread, and somewhere in the space between those two gestures, something existed that had started with kindness and grown into protection, had evolved from owing into something harder to name but easier to carry. The district hummed. The diner filled and emptied and filled again. Mincio worked her shifts and went home to an apartment that was safe and close and paid for through complicated chains of favor and consequence. And sometimes, standing at her window looking out at streets that belonged to everyone and no one, she thought about the moment she'd offered lunch to a stranger who looked like he needed it, and wondered if she'd understood even then that some gestures echoed further than you could see, creating ripples that reorganized the world in small but permanent ways. She hadn't, but she understood now. And when the next person came into the diner looking lost or hungry, or just temporarily defeated by circumstances, Min-seo would remember what it felt like to make a choice that mattered, to offer something small that cost you a little, to create debts that transformed into protection and care. Because that's how things worked in the district now. In this version of the world, where quiet men remembered kindness and waitresses carried phone numbers that connected to power most people never saw. That's how debts worked when both sides honored them correctly. And Min-seo, standing behind the counter of a diner that served turkey sandwiches and coffee to anyone who walked through the door, had learned that some debts were worth carrying forever, because they reminded you that gestures mattered, that care created consequences, and that sometimes the most dangerous people in the world protected you not despite who you were, but because of it. She wiped tables, poured coffee, made sandwiches with good bread. And when Kang Jae-hoon walked in, she smiled, small, brief, genuine, and brought him breakfast exactly how he liked it. Because some things you remembered. And some people were worth remembering for.